The Legal Mindset Corner will begin after a brief word from today's sponsor, Answering Legal. Visit answeringlegal.com to learn more about our 24/7 virtual receptionist team.
I've been utilizing Answering Legal for my firm since 2015, and truth be told, it was a game changer for me. I can be anywhere, and I'm getting my phones answered by Answering Legal. A strategic partner, as I call Answering Legal, provides a great reward. What is that reward? It's time. Time for whatever I want to do. As a private practitioner, I would highly recommend Answering Legal to other private practitioners. Now, every call goes answered.
Welcome back to the Legal Mindset Corner, sponsored by our friends at Answering Legal. I am your co-host, Becky Howlett, and along with my wonderful co-host, Cynthia Sharp, we are dedicated to exploring a range of attorney well-being topics, including mindfulness, developing resilience, work-life integration, and more. On today's episode, we're going to be exploring strategies to maintain lawyer wellness, especially during the holiday season, which we have just around the corner. And we're privileged to have our special guest with us today, Danielle Hall, who's the Executive Director of the Kansas Lawyers Assistance Program. In addition to managing daily operations, Danielle provides direct assistance to both law students and lawyers who may be struggling with mental health, substance use disorder, or law practice management related issues. Danielle regularly teaches continuing legal education on many topics, including lawyer well-being, ethics, law practice management, and technology use. She currently serves as the Vice President of Policy for the Institute of Wellbeing in Law and is a member of the Executive Committee for the Kansas Lawyer Wellbeing Task Force, among many other past and present committee chair positions, volunteer positions, professor positions. Danielle, we're just so pleased to have you with us here today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here with you today.
Yes, in case our audience wasn't aware, and that was me being really judicious, and because Danielle's bio at CV is just so incredible. Obviously, so you were a true advocate for attorney well-being, just in every facet of your life, and even it was in her free time, she coaches moot court, and I was like, what free time?
Right? I tell people, I can do these discussions because I'm a work in progress myself, particularly when it comes to setting boundaries.
Perfect. Well, you're the perfect person to have on this topic today. And, again, our topic today is really talking about how can we manage stress during the holidays, and the holidays are often portrayed as a time of joyfulness, of celebration. But, I think oftentimes we don't openly acknowledge that it can be a really, really challenging, lonely period for many. So, Danielle, can you tell us in particular why that may be the case for lawyers?
Absolutely. I say the one thing to not forget during the holiday season is that as lawyers, we are human too, just like everybody else, right? Even though, we like to think that we're superheroes at times and we can balance everything going on, we're human just like everybody else is. And so I think some of the things that lawyers experience are similar to what the rest of the population experiences during this time. Things like grief. Maybe it's isolation if we can't get home to see our families. Even things like maybe you do get home to see your families, but you're dealing with maybe difficult family dynamics or difficult family situations. And then you have that aspect of our colleagues that are in recovery and are attending the holiday events and are trying to balance that and be mindful, but at the same time participate and feel like they have a sense of belonging, whether that's with office holiday parties or whether it's even with family related events. And then you throw in there kind of that perfect storm of the holiday season financial stress and some of our burdens and obligations that we feel there, particularly if we are a perfectionist, right? And we want the holidays to be perfect. We may equate that to, I have to spend a lot of funds in order to get that perfectionism. And we know that perfectionism is something that lawyers struggle with quite a bit to begin with. And so you throw all of that together and put that in the mix of the holiday season on top of what we do as lawyers. And I think that that creates maybe for some circumstances that makes it ripe for things like the typical holiday stress, and even maybe at heightened levels as compared to regular times of the year.
What also comes into mind is that there are many practitioners that have end of the year deadlines. So there may be deals that have to be closed before December 31st. Also, for those of our colleagues who are in the family law arena, those cases tend to come to very heightened emotions during the holidays. Who's going to get Jimmy for Christmas? Or the ex-husband did not bring Jimmy back on time. And so who gets the calls? The lawyers.
Absolutely.
And so you're caught in that perfect storm that you described. And so can you give some suggestions of some effective strategies to manage stress and to even maintain well-being during the holiday season?
Absolutely. The first piece of advice that I give to my colleagues is don't throw your well-being practices out the window just because it's the holiday season. And sometimes that's hard to remember, even those of us that have our self-care in good check and we adhere to it and we are mindful about ensuring we are taking care of ourselves. The holidays can get busy, schedules can get busy. So if you already have a self-care practice, ensure that you are maintaining that through these times. But if you're trying to figure out maybe something new to do, or maybe you don't have a self-care kind of regimen that you follow now, I would say start with the basics. Let's not forget about those, right? We know we need to eat well, we need to get some sleep, we need to get some exercise. But even though we know that can go out the window. Sometimes that's the first thing to go out the window during the holidays with all of the events and everything that we have planned. And we want to indulge, right? And I think that that's okay too, to have the ability to do that during the holiday season, and maybe not giving yourself some grace during this time as well, particularly if the self-care is not working. Don't be hard on yourself about that. Get up the next morning and try again. But of course, there's the good ones that are, we talk about a lot. Mindfulness, meditation, things of that nature. Trying out yoga, maybe if you haven't tried that out for the first time. But, my background, a lot of my background, I first started off in kind of the law practice management space. And to me, these two things go hand in hand for me. They're interconnected, whether or not we have good law practice management skills and how that might impact our well-being. And Cynthia, you mentioned the deadline aspect of it, right? That we may be running up against. And so ensuring that even in our office space, we are utilizing things like our time management skills, utilizing things like, still maintaining our boundaries with our clients during this time period, learning how to say no to things can be extremely helpful as well. So not to forget about that aspect of it, as well as maintaining your practice, staying on top of things, making lists. That they say, Santa, make the list, check it twice. We probably need to be doing that in our office as well during the holiday seasons to ensure that we are being organized, knowing that we may be taking time away from the work and attending events, but still needing to maintain our obligations to our clients.
You mentioned maybe trying out yoga in this time. I just have to give a shout out to some close family friends of mine, because it is so hard when we have all these amazing events we want to attend and our loved ones we want to connect with, and maybe they're traveling in, we don't get to see them often. So it's my mentee from law school, her family, she's out, fighting the tenants' rights fight in San Francisco. But when she comes back in, I just absolutely love spending time with her family around the holidays, because we will go as a family and do like family yoga together. We will go and do walks, after the meal and stuff. So anyway, that just made me think how helpful it can be if we really have, the environment, the accountability partners there to help us with those healthy habits. We can make it a family activity. And the other thing that struck me, Danielle, was you said learning to say no. Which leads me to my next question for you. We started out talking about boundaries. You mentioned I've got really great boundaries. That's why I have so much time to do all these amazing things. How can we set these boundaries, during the really busy holiday season? And that includes with work, family, and our social commitments. Because I'll just say, for myself personally, sometimes I feel really guilty saying no, especially if a family member is asking me to do something.
That was something that I struggle with, and even at times still struggle with to this day, right? That guilt aspect of saying no. But I also have to remind myself that if I continue to say yes to everything, I'm setting the expectations that others are going to have for me. And so sometimes I need to give myself that reminder. So some couple of tools that I have implemented that I have found really helpful are when I get asked to do something, particularly when we talk about, what's today, you look at today's date and somebody's asking you to do something a month from now. And it looks like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. That's a month from now. But I've started asking myself, if there's a length in time in between when somebody has asked me to participate or to, whether that's to go to a social event or whether that's to take on a new task that maybe I wasn't expecting, I've started asking myself if this were due tomorrow, or if this event were tomorrow, or if this event were this evening, would I still say yes to it? So that way I can get in the right frame of mind as far as, is this going to be something that I'm going to enjoy? Or is this going to be something that I'm going to see maybe some benefit from, whether that's building relationships or getting out and meeting new people or taking on a new task that might challenge me. So looking at that and that frame of mind has helped me say no to people. But though a clinician once told me something that stuck with me to this day, and she told me this many years ago, particularly with the guilt aspect of it. And what I was recommended by this clinician was to use a concept that she called the Oreo method. And that is sandwiching the no. So the negative, what I feel like is negative and causes me guilt, with two positives when I feel like I have to give that no and I'm struggling with it. So, I may thank the person, thank you for thinking of me. I'm honored that you would invite me, or I'm honored that you asked me to participate. But at this time, I don't think I can do it given my schedule. But maybe next year when this time rolls around, contact me. I might be available at that time. And so it does nothing for the person on the receiving end of it, right? I'm still saying no to them. But what it does is it helps me kind of mentally be okay with giving that negative, which I think is what we sometimes often struggle with.
Now that you've revealed to us that you are a professional at saying no, we are even more thrilled that you said yes to us and agreed to be our guest.
Well, I couldn't pass this one up, not to spend time with the both of you. It was something that I was really excited to do. So.
Well, and so now there's some people though that don't have a lot to say no to. And so perhaps they live far from family members. Maybe they've gone through a recent breakup in a relationship. For whatever reason, they may feel a little bit lonely, a little bit isolated. How do they cope with these feelings?
Right. I think that's a really good question, particularly around the holidays, right? If a lawyer finds themselves in a situation where, maybe they're saying no to a lot of things because of work, they can't get back home to see family, particularly when family lives a distance away. My recommendation in that aspect of it is one, don't ignore your feelings, even though in the law we're often told to ignore our emotions and be very practical about things. I think it's important to acknowledge what it is that you're feeling so you can work through the emotions, for one, so it doesn't impact you later on simply because you're ignoring those feelings. But the other aspect of this, I think, is looking for other ways to connect, particularly if you find yourself in the situation where you can't get back home or you can't spend time that you had intended to spend with particular family and friends. So whether that's using things like we're doing today, using technology to still connect with those people, picking up the phone, which is something we don't do a lot of now. I feel like we do a lot of interaction via Zoom and all of that stuff, but even making a quick phone call to somebody to say that you're thinking about them or that you miss them and hear their voice can be particularly helpful. And then finding who your group of people are where you live. Whether that is another colleague that you go and you go out to lunch with one day, so you can still have that connection during these times. So just looking for alternative ways to connect, I think, is important. But also, like I said, acknowledging how you're feeling and not pushing that aside so it doesn't impact you further, particularly if you're still home because of a client matter, because of a deadline. I think it's important to work through those emotions, so that way those don't have a tendency to creep into our work and maybe then serve as a mechanism that prevent us from doing what it is that we need to get done.
Absolutely.
Great suggestions.
Yeah, no, these are great. And, it kind of dovetails into my next question, because I'm just thinking about, when I was a law student, for example, and I would come home for Thanksgiving. I mean, it was only 30 minutes away. It wasn't that far. But, but I would come home for Thanksgiving, and then I remember it was the most stressful holiday ever, because you're like in the midst of finals prep, and then everyone is asking you like, how's law school? How's it going? Blah, blah, blah. Like, just like, it's like, first of all, you feel so guilty that you're taking any time away from that. And then, and then it's like constant reminders
Right?
of that. I still think I might have some PTSD because I still associate Thanksgiving as a stressful holiday, kind of because of this past experience. But having said that, how can our family, how can our friends and our peers best support us during this time?
I think that's a good question. What's interesting, I've worked with some law students who, the law schools, I think, are doing some great things on telling them, go home and tell your family right from the very beginning. This is the space I need, right? I need to also start studying for finals. Third-year students, right? You're told start filling out your bar application over Thanksgiving break. So you have all of these things that you're expected to do. And so having those discussions with family to put up your boundaries, I think, becomes important, both for law students and for lawyers, right? We're going to have probably some boundaries with our family as well. But one thing that I think families can do is to, one, think about their own expectations and having those discussions with the law student or with the lawyer about what do you have going on, so that way I can respect your boundaries. But I also think that question that sometimes we get asked when we show up somewhere and we're stressed and we've looked really overwhelmed and we're wearing it in our body and on our faces. I think we as people, even colleague to colleague, have a tendency to just ask, are you okay? And when we ask that question, what has a tendency to happen? We all say, oh, I'm fine. I'm okay. I'm trying to get better at saying, no, I'm going to tell you I'm not okay, because I'm not okay right now. And you need to know that. But that's what we all have a tendency to do. So if, as a family member, you notice that the lawyer or the law student just seems very overwhelmed, maybe approaching that person differently by asking, is there something I can do to help you? Or I notice you haven't been yourself as of late. You want to talk about that. Particularly if we're not really communicating, if that lawyer or that law student isn't communicating what they need in order to take care of themselves while they're home for the holidays, approaching that conversation differently with that question, I think, can make a lot of difference for the person that you're checking in on.
You're so right. And I'm tearing up because this is reminding me of an experience I had. I came home for a family member's funeral, and I was clearly in distress. I mean, I had lost so much weight. I mean, I just looked very gaunt, and it was clear I was struggling, right? Just like you said, anyone who was looking at me could observe that. And one of my really close teachers from middle school and high school was at the funeral. And she came up to me, and instead of asking, "Are you okay?" she asked, "What's wrong?" She just immediately knew. And I just, and like the facade just fell in that
Right.
moment. And she just enveloped me in a hug. But anyway, that just made me think of that, because that is so spot on. And I think if we go that little extra, that little extra piece, I think people will open up and be vulnerable and acknowledge when they aren't okay, and that it's okay to not be okay.
Yes.
And sometimes people just don't necessarily have the support system around them, or have people that they can't phone a friend or don't. And so can you tell me that with your work with Kansas Lawyer Assistance Programs, what kind of resources are available that could be helpful during this season?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. Our Lawyers Assistance Program here in Kansas, as of recently, we've started expanding into a lot of different areas and a lot of different services that I think can be helpful, particularly for folks during this time of year and any time of year. But one big thing that we offer that I feel like gets most utilized is our short-term counseling that we have available for lawyers and law students, which when you're talking about something very specific like struggling with the holiday season, whether that's from grief or isolation or whatever it might be, something like short-term counseling and talking to a clinician, to a professional, can be helpful for you to work through whatever it is you're going through during that time. And what's great about that service is that it's actually free to the lawyer or to the law student who utilizes it. And we can get you up to 8 sessions completely paid for by our program, so it's at no cost to you in order to utilize the service. But I think the other thing that may be helpful, particularly for those feeling isolated, is we have a large network of volunteers. We have over 200 volunteers in our state that are really there to serve as a connection, whether that's a mentor, whether that's a colleague, or just the person who calls to check in on you and see how you're doing. And so for those feeling isolated, that might be a great service at this time to connect you with somebody, a colleague. And we try to connect folks with people who have had similar experiences. So that way, that person has been through it, has lived through it. And so, of course, they can then have those conversations to also help you along the way as you might be struggling. For those who maybe are struggling, that are in recovery and struggling with attending events and figuring out how to navigate that, we've got, our volunteers, we've got resources here at the Lawyers Assistance Program, even if it's just picking up a phone and having a conversation with us about, I attended this one event and I'm really struggling. Sometimes those conversations with people who have been there and can help give you some tips along the way can be helpful. The other thing I would say is our educational programs and resources. If you need that reminder of why you need to, what you can do to focus on your well-being, then maybe looking at some of our services and resources we have out there through our Kansas Task Force for Lawyer Wellbeing, which is connected here to our Lawyers Assistance Program. We're actually getting ready to launch right before the Thanksgiving holiday. We're going to have a resources page for this very topic. So I was super excited when you said that this would be kind of what we would be talking about today, because we've been working to develop these resources over the last couple of months. And so on our website, just before the Thanksgiving holiday, lawyers will have the ability to go there to get access to these resources and links to some of the same stuff that we're talking about today, articles and things of that nature, if you're looking for some resources to help you navigate this time. So we got a lot of different things that we're doing. And I encourage anybody, who needs help or even wants to just ask questions about our program and what we do here to just reach out. I'll add one more thing, because I feel like I always have to remind people of this, and that's we are 100% confidential in nature, per our Supreme Court rule here in Kansas. And so if you call us, we adhere to the same level of confidentiality and attorney-client privilege, just as if we were forming an attorney-client relationship. And I always put it in that terminology because I feel like that's something lawyers and even law students will recognize. Okay, that's a high level of confidentiality there. So that's what we adhere to. you. And, others who may be in other states, I will say, look into your own lawyer's assistance program. Many of the state bar association and courts have developed lawyer's assistance programs. Many of us offer similar circumstances. Some offer different ones that may be available for you. So definitely reaching out, if you are not in the state of Kansas, to your own lawyer's assistance program may be helpful during this time.
Well, I'm impressed with everything that you've put together. And I know some other states have some excellent resources as well, but yours is particularly comprehensive. And I want to echo your suggestion is for people to reach out. We saw statistics that during the pandemic, even or during the initial stages, even though people were more stressed out, they were reaching out less. And so we just hope that if we can motivate even one person to reach out, it's worth it.
Right. I tell people all the time, even if you don't know if we can be helpful for whatever it is that you're experiencing, still reach out. Because if I don't have a resource, or this is kind of a new area that we haven't dealt with, I feel like it's my responsibility and obligation to connect you with maybe somebody who can assist you, even if it's not maybe with the lawyer's assistance program. So even if you don't know if we're the right place, call us anyways, and we will get you connected where maybe if we're not appropriate, maybe somebody else who might be.
And that was just making me think, Danielle, that, even if somebody was calling and it wasn't, you might not have a resource, particularly to help them, but maybe they become aware of and learn about different resources that could help them in the future, or even a colleague who could be struggling. And, I just remember Cindy sharing that she was a volunteer. Were you a volunteer with NAMI, was it, Cindy? And you would.
It was this one. I did volunteer with a lot of different places, but the story that I know you're talking about is that I'm a recovering alcoholic, and so after, I guess maybe about my second year in recovery, I thought, well, I want to bring the message to others. So I volunteered for our statewide program on people to come to not AA meetings, but Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers meetings. So I volunteered for one in a county that was close to me. I would show up every Thursday at 5:30. And it was me. And, there was another volunteer as well. But, we had hoped that the philosophy built it and they would come would play out. But I do have to say it was a little discouraging that people just were afraid to reach out. And I got it. I totally understood it. So I think we're even in the past decade have come a lot further in being open about these conversations. And I hope that continues.
I'd have to agree with that. I was about to ask you, when was that, when you were doing that? Because, yeah, I agree with you that I think in the last decade, we've started to see some change. And I think as folks like yourselves continue to do things like these podcasts, the work that you do as well with your writing and your education and everything you put out there, I think that is so helpful in reducing the stigma, allowing people to have the conversations. So that way, hopefully, somebody who needs to hear it will hear that seeking help is a sign of strength, right? It's not a weakness and shouldn't be something that we should have to worry about in this profession, even though we have this really large fear. And I think even something as just simply feeling stressed during the holidays, there are some lawyers out there who would say, well, I'm not going to contact help for this, right? Because this isn't something that rises to a level. And I think part of that is still that stigma that's associated with it. And so even if just one person hears the message, then, participating in things like this, I think makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. And, dovetailing off that, do you have any personal experience or stories related to lawyer wellness, like especially during the holidays, that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I'll share a couple of things that I've dealt with in, I would say the last 10 years or so. So there was a period of time where I was really struggling with grief during the holiday season. So my father had colon cancer and passed away in mid-January, so right after the holiday season, but his health really declined during the Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday. And then probably about 5 years after that, my stepdad actually passed away, and he struggled with alcohol abuse, and ultimately liver, kidneys ended up failing as a result of that struggle with alcohol. And so for me, for many years after losing both, of those male figures, important, prominent figures in my life, I really struggled with Christmas just because, my stepdad passed away in October, right before, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then my dad in January. And so I was struggling to kind of feel that happiness surrounding the holiday season. And we talk about that a lot, right? It's supposed to be this happy time of the year. And so sometimes you even feel guilty when you don't feel happy, or you don't feel like being joyful at certain events. And so I had to take a step back and really process that grief and process what I was feeling. And I think that that's why I share that message with people who are feeling grief in isolation, to really process it. Don't push it away, to really work through those feelings. And one of the things that I did was I, decided I wanted to lean on something that was culturally specific to me to get me through the holiday season. And we just passed it this week, Dia de los Muertos, which is, the celebration of those who have passed before us. And it's believed through that holiday that they come back to visit us during a few days at the beginning of November, November 1st and 2nd. And so in my house now, we put up our Dia de los Muertos altar. I have my family, my relatives who have passed. And that for me has brought me a sense of peace in celebrating and connecting with my culture, and getting me through, kind of preparing me mentally to go through the Thanksgiving and the Christmas holiday now, because I know that they have came to visit me during this time period. And so that was a way for me to connect and to really work through my grief in a really kind of culturally symbolic way for me. But the other story I do want to share, because I think one that can maybe a lot of people can relate to, particularly our perfectionist lawyers. So my husband and I, who, by the way, my husband is also a lawyer. So now you got two perfectionists in the household, right? So we have opted, since we bought our house that we now live in several years ago, we decided we were going to host the big holiday brunch that we now do around the holiday time, to invite all of our family in. And so what happened was, this was supposed to be a happy, joyful time. Everybody was going to come over. And I found myself so stressed, because I was like, I want the food to be perfect. I want the decorations to be perfect. I want everybody to get along, right? I wanted to control everything that was going on in the situation. Ultimately, that's what it was. And so I'd get so mad for a few years, right? Brunch wasn't done on time because somebody showed up early. So I had to just flip my thinking about this particular event. And so things like, well, somebody showed up early and the brunch isn't done. Now I have to think about that differently and say, somebody showed up early because they wanted to be here to spend that extra time with us. So I could stop worrying about the fact that the brunch wasn't ready by the time the first person arrived. So if you struggle with the perfectionism during the holiday seasons, like I do, and I'm still working on, one, setting your expectations differently, looking at what it is that you want to get out of the event ultimately, right? It's the togetherness. It's the time with your family, with your friends. That's most important. And choosing to focus on those things rather than the small details can be helpful for those of us that struggle with that perfectionism aspect.
Well, I can certainly relate to what you said. And I just imagine a lot of our listeners are playing that movie in their own head.
Yep.
Well, you've shared with us, I mean, I don't know in your programs who sleeps because you put so much into it. And we're thrilled with the new initiative that you're launching. But are you able to give us a little peek into, is there anything new for 2024? Or are you going to continue working with your foundational aspect?
Yeah, we do have some things ahead of us in 2024, particularly here at the Lawyers Assistance Program. One of the things that we have been testing, it's in a pilot phase right now, and we've been working with bar applicants who have gotten flagged on the bar application process as it relates to debt that they have to report on the application. And so what we've done over the course of the last 6 months with these bar applicants who have come through the pilot program is we've started developing a financial wellness program. For us, we see that connection with well-being, right? And so we've worked with these students on putting a financial plan in place in order to take care of the debt that they got flagged on the bar application. And what that has done in our state is allowed those students to say that they have put corrective measures in place and that they are working with the Lawyers Assistance Program. And therefore, that is now a non-issue on the bar application, and those applicants can get moved through the process a lot faster. And so we've seen success doing this with our bar applicants, that in 2024, we now want to launch the program out of this kind of beta testing phase and move it into a full-blown program where we're also going to now offer it for lawyers who are interested in developing a financial wellness plan for them personally, and even taking a look at maybe things like financial wellness as it relates to the firms, particularly for solos and smalls. How do you navigate that aspect of it? So we're really excited to launch this in 2024, and we hope that we will have lawyers who will take advantage of this particular program.
Wow, you've got a real holistic approach there. So I've got to applaud you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That was a goal. I'll say I was very inspired by the National Task Force report for lawyer well-being and looking at it more from that holistic life dimensional approach. I think it's a goal of ours, the Lawyers Assistance Program, to ensure that we have touch points in all of those key areas of those life dimensions that gets talked about with lawyer well-being, to ensure that we're meeting really the needs of the lawyer population.
Absolutely. And, Cynthia won't toot her own horn on this, but she actually wrote the book literally on financial planning for lawyers. So I know she's a big fan of this topic, and just like you were saying, that you came from a background of the law practice management and how you're really weaving that into this holistic well-being approach. We think it's brilliant. So,
well, thank you.
And Danielle, what is one piece of advice, as we're getting near the end of our episode, what's one piece of advice that you'd like to leave our listeners with regarding maintaining their well-being during the holiday season?
Yeah, I think the big thing that I want to stress is to give yourself some grace during this time, because I think that can be applicable in a lot of different areas. So that's one thing that I want to stress. The other thing I want to stress is that well-being and implementing self-care is not a one-size-fits-all sort of thing. I always remind people of that. And so if you try something during the holiday season and you're like, well, that didn't work, don't throw out self-care entirely. Sometimes it is trial and error to figure out what will work individually for you. A good example for me is the fact that I tout meditation. I try it. I will continue to try to master it. I'm not very good at it. But what I am good at is getting up every morning at 5:30 and getting my workout in. And oddly enough, that's the one time of the day where my brain isn't running 100 miles an hour. So in some ways, for me, that kind of equates to what I'm hoping to get out of doing meditation. And so it's trial and error. And picking something, if it doesn't work for you, find something else, because I promise you that there is something out there that will work individually for you.
Yes, I just have to do a round of applause, because that's exactly the message that we always try to give our audience members as well, especially when it comes to practicing mindfulness meditation. And that's why they call it practice. And I'll just give a nod to anyone out there who may be listening and has also tried meditation and found, these thoughts, I can't stop them. Yeah, good. Good luck with that. If the thoughts are coming in, if the thoughts are coming in, that means your brain is working appropriately as it was as it is supposed to. But yeah, you're so right that we may try a tool, a technique, whatever it is. It might be meditation, it might be another self-care strategy, and we may absolutely hate it. And that doesn't mean throw the baby out with the bathwater and suddenly, I'm just a naturally anxious person, like these things don't work. No. And
No hope for me.
Right. And so I think that is such a critical message that, different strokes for different folks, and don't give up if you're trying to access something and you're not getting immediate success with it. And I think the same message should also come into play if we're trying to access mental health resources. Like, for example, getting in with a counselor. I know for myself, I was so lucky that, my present counselor, like we really did hit it off, and she was a good fit for me. But I know I've been to others where we didn't vibe as much. And that's not to say that, therapy or, that specific type of therapy even.
Right.
Looking beyond that and realizing that, yes, give it another shot and sticking with it. And we're so happy to hear that you are sticking with the mindfulness, even when it's not easy and not hard. Like, yes. Right. and also,
I'm not going to give up. I'm going to master this. That's my goal.
It's a lifelong journey, Danielle, as Cindy and I will both attest. And, as we try to tell people, the effects are cumulative. So the more you're doing it, the more you're going to be able to really get into, that state of relaxation. But it's so funny. I just got home from my big mindfulness practice is a movement practice. I actually go to yoga. My teacher is actually also an attorney, a recovering attorney like myself, who no longer practices, but now is in well-being. But she gets it, I'm like, Katie. Right. Myself, I'm a certified meditation instructor, but even me, I find that it's helpful for me to have someone go guide me so I can truly let go. And even today, I just noticed, like, wow, I'm real, like, my central nervous system this week has been in like a heightened state. And I'm able to notice this because of that underlying foundation of the practice. So even if right now I may be experiencing, kind of a little more aroused central nervous system, I'm also able to recognize that and then try to take these additional steps to help with my self-care. So anyway, that was a long, you provoked the meditation instructor in me. I just had to dovetail off your very good advice on that. So thank you so much.
You may already have mastered. My attitude is that the formal practice is what supports my informal practice, which is how I live my life in the present moment. And so if I'm living my life in the present moment most of the time, then I'm like, hey, I guess it must be working.
It must be working then. Yes, that's a good way of looking at that.
Yeah. So, look, you've given us so many great resources. And here's the one thing that I forgot is how are people going to get in touch with the Kansas Lawyers Assistance Program if they, or maybe somebody they know, needs some support?
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to go to our website. So that's www.kalap.com. You'll find all of the contact information there. We are available by email. We are available by phone. I can't stress this enough. I just want to throw this out there again. We are 100% confidential, regardless of the way that you choose to contact us. And if you are calling about a concerned colleague, we call that a referral. and not a report. It's a referral for services. And so that also remains 100% confidential. And if we have to do a check-in on somebody, we won't tell them so-and-so called us. And so we want to really encourage colleagues to, if you feel like something's wrong and you don't feel comfortable approaching the person, then we are the perfect place to call, and we can reach out to somebody who might be struggling.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed our discussion today. I feel like I could talk about this with you all for hours.
Yes.
I'm sure we'll have another opportunity.
That is absolutely correct. Obviously, kindred spirits here. And yeah, we were judicious with our timing, because I feel the same. And just to dovetail off of that, if any of our listeners are in a different state, you can just Google your state and Lawyers Assistance Program. It'll probably be the top hit. And I'll just say, for anyone out there struggling, please know that you are never, ever alone. So please reach out to support. And with that said, if you haven't had a chance to explore the services offered by our producers, Answering Legal, now is the time. And while you're at it, please do check out our website. We've got a host of free mindfulness resources, including strategies on how to manage stress and promote your well-being at legalburnout.com. Again, this is Becky Howlett and my co-host Cynthia Sharp. And until we meet next time, just breathe.